So you thought you'd never have to live home with mom again. Well, think again. As the population ages, elderly parents everywhere are moving in with their children and changing everything. David Horgan, along with Shara Block, wrote When Your Parent Moves In, and he addresses these concerns with me today. Thank you so much for your time, David. So, studies have shown in the past couple of years, the numbers are starting to rise of elderly parents moving in with their children, and it seems like this trend is going to continue to go up.
Well, I started noticing this happening about 7 years ago. My wife at the time came to me and said, I don't think my mom can live on her own anymore. What would you think about her moving in with us? And I think any responsible husband is going to say yes to something like that right away, which is what I did. And, Eliz, I'll tell you, we had some really bumpy times in the beginning, because we didn't plan this out. We didn't sit down and prepare for it. We just dove right into it.
And there wasn't a whole wealth of information out there.
Yeah, what I found, there was really very little. There were a couple of articles here and there. So that's when I called up Shara Block and I said, look, there needs to be a guide. People are doing this. They're doing it the way that we did. They're just jumping in. They're not preparing for it. And the results can be disastrous. I mean, it can be a very, very difficult situation if you don't plan for this properly.
Now, this multi-generational living is happening more and more, whether because of the economy. We're living into our 60s and 70s and 80s now, as opposed to 50 years ago. We were only living up to our 50s. So it seems to be happening more and more, and the trend is going up. It's not going to stop. So what are some ways that children can prepare for this, or maybe even aging parents? How can they prepare about moving back in with their kids?
Well, at first, I would say get 2 copies of When Your Parent Moves In. You read one and have your parent read the other one. At least that way people can understand what it's really going to be like. In our heads, we walk around with this backup plan. If something ever happened to mom or dad, I'll just have her move in with me. In reality, when they actually come and live in your home and they're there every day, it's a very different situation. There are things that you don't think about, and you usually make this decision at a time of crisis. Something happens. Mom falls, dad's in the hospital. Everybody kind of gathers in this corner and says, you've got to move them into your house, and they don't think it through. It's so important to sit down and plan this thing out, know what you're getting into.
What would you say are some of the top concerns or areas that you should look at and be prepared that your life will be affected with elderly parents moving in?
Well, think about the dynamic, the role reversal. You're in your home raising your children. Mom or dad move in, how are they going to fit into that family dynamic? You guys going to have dinner together every single night? When you're sitting around the couch watching TV with your kids, do you want your mom or dad, or do you want your mother-in-law sitting in the room with you every single night? Are you prepared for that?
It depends on the relationship you have, I guess, with your in-laws.
Yeah, and that's a good point. What I found is the relationship I had with my mother-in-law was somewhat superficial. How you doing? How's the weather? Right? I mean, that's that kind of relationship you have when you don't see each other very often. When you're living together, you've got to get to know each other. I'll tell you a little story about how, in the beginning, all I thought about, what's happening to me? How is my life being infringed upon? What is the burden that's being placed on me? Then I started thinking, what's happening to her? What did she give up? And I was talking with my wife at the time, and she said, boy, she used to love in her yard, she'd put all these things out and decorate and manicure the lawn and do all this great stuff. So I went upstairs and I printed this official deed to the backyard. And I deeded her the backyard. I said, it is now yours to do whatever you want with it. And a tear came to her eye. She was thinking, all right, he gets me. He knows it's not just all about him. That was the moment we connected as human beings. And that's the only way that you guys can live together. If you think it's going to be superficial, what'll happen is someone will be in the middle, right? If it's your father-in-law and it's your wife, you're not going to talk to your father-in-law about him smoking on the porch. You're going to go to your wife and say, he's got to cut that out. And she's going to say, he kind of doesn't want it back and forth, and someone's in the middle, and it's a terrible dynamic, and it's not sustainable.
Now, often in our society, females are looked at as the caregivers. So females in the scenario, AKA, would be the daughters. Right. Do you see that gender role still being played out?
Absolutely. It always comes down to the daughters. And a lot of times the daughters feel, in our case, what would happen is you had my wife taking care of her mother most of the time because she had some health issues. Her sister lived down the street, so she would come. So you had all the daughters doing all of this work. especially when she got sick. They'd be in shifts. The son would only come by to say, what's happening? And in a lot of ways, he got all this glory. He was praised, oh, my boy, while the girls are there diligently working. And that dynamic happens a lot. It's pretty much the standard.
What are some ways to help balance that?
Keep your parent in their home for as long as possible. That's what every expert will tell you. It's better for them to stay in their own home. The idea of moving them in sounds good on paper, but in reality, especially if they have health issues, what I say is that I can bring you a blanket, I can take your temperature, I can make you soup, but I can't help you with lung difficulties or if you need real medical attention. And that's what a lot of people think when they move in with their kids, that especially the daughters are going to be like their nurses. And they get very frustrated because they can't really give them the care that they need. So again, you want to think this thing through before you dive into it.
So there are definitely struggles when coming to terms with this, but let's talk about, give me a good thing. What is a benefit? What's the positive?
There are tons of good things. And that's why I wave the red flag so people prepare. If you prepare and you sit down and say, let's have dinner together twice a week, let's make sure you've got your space, we have ours. Let's talk about this up front. The relationship between grandparents and grandchildren is, a very special relationship. In our case, our kids were little and they would come, they'd put on little shows for grandma playing guitar, She used to go to a lot more of their plays and things because she was there. So there's an opportunity for the grandchildren to have more time with grandma, granddad. There's a great opportunity for you to connect with this person who you might have lived either a superficial or that relationship where you're the mom and I'm the daughter and you tell me what to do and I do it begrudgingly. You can become friends on an even level. And that's one of the nicest things. When I became friends with my mother-in-law and I'd go have coffee and we'd hang out, we'd talk like equals, that's when it was a good, sustainable dynamic. And that's when she sensed that I needed some space with my own family. Not that she wasn't family, but that nuclear family. I needed some of that time, and eventually we got there. We could have been a lot less bumpy if I had a book like this when I first started.
That's the key. Strengthen the family bond, don't weaken it. Thank you so much, author David Horgan from
Thank you.
When Your Parent Moves In. Thank you.
Thank you.